I guess the feeling that characterizes that time for me is just more confusion. I had a real loyalty built up to the counterculture. I'd had some wonderful times. I'd experienced parts of myself that I'd never known before. I'd been able to express parts of myself that had never been allowed expression. I'd had some good memories. And yet it wasn't paying off for me. It wasn't going anywhere. And I didn't really have a model to follow anymore. I had a model to follow into the movement because basically everybody was doing it. Everybody was, en masse heading into a countercultural style one way or another. But when I was really done with drugs and when I was really done with that way of thinking, I didn't know what to think anymore. I didn't know what to believe. I didn't know what to espouse. I didn't know what to wear. I was really just kind of lost. And I was also, at that point, getting divorced. And so I did go back and live with my parents for a while. And I did try on, literally tried on some polyester pantsuits, and I kind of tried that out to see, well, do I just kind of go back all the way? Or no, it really wasn't me anymore. I had just gone too far the other way. I started working. I just started working, and I started working on my education again. And I started just step by step trying to bring some sanity and clarity back into my life. And I started really searching spiritually for an answer. Southern California at that time offered a lot of answers, and I tried, I think, all of them out at one point or another. I was involved in yoga, and I had a guru. I went on a number of yoga retreats, and I did experience a certain peace of mind and a certain calming effect for the emotional chaos that I was coming out of. I tried all kinds of kind of oddball churches, like Church of the Inner Sanctum of the Left Brain of Christ, and only in Southern California can you find such offerings. But and I got a little bit out of each one. I'd try something for a few months, and I'd get something out of it, and I'd be real excited about it at first because I thought this was going to really bring me an answer. And then I would see the loopholes. I'd see that the leader was actually sleeping with all the devotees, or that somehow the philosophy just didn't quite make it. It was just a little too off the wall or too weird. There would be something that would disappoint me, and I would go on, and I would go on searching. And during this time, I took something from each philosophy and each idea. Eastern religions were really big at the time, and I embraced at least the Americanized version of Buddhism and Hinduism and some of the Eastern thought. I didn't expect to explore Christianity because I felt I had already done that as a kid, as a Catholic. I thought that I had pretty much tried that and hadn't found what I was looking for. And so it never occurred to me to explore Christianity, but I tried everything else. I studied Judaism, and I really liked that. That was really meat on the bone for me. That was something that was really deep and ancient, and it made a lot of sense. And I was still hungering, though. I was still hungering. Personally, I just need to have an experiential, spiritual experience. I can't just have a religion that may meet other people's needs. I really need to grip into it and grasp onto it, heart and soul. I need to be able to connect on a really deep level with what I believe in. And so I tried one after another religious experience. I was also involved in what now is termed the New Age. I was a psychic. From the time I was 15, I had really extraordinary ability to read people's hands, and I could tell people a lot more than I had read in the little paperback book that I had bought about palmistry. I could tell them a lot more than the book ever gave me knowledge about, and I knew I was tapping into something that was a spiritual realm. And I explored all of the I don't know the word. I explored the availability of astrology, and to the point where I really felt I was almost able to draw up charts myself, and I could, with that same psychic ability, I could read tarot cards, and I became almost, I guess you'd say, dependent upon the I Ching and daily readings, daily spiritual readings to give me guidance and give me a sense of purpose and definition. After years of exploring everything that was available on the spiritual market, I was still hungry. In fact, I was hungrier than I had been before. I knew I hadn't found it for me. I could see that other people were on some kind of a path, and I felt frustrated that my path was so eclectic and so broad. And so I began saying, God, I know you exist, and I know you are real, and since I can't make decisions for myself, I recognized that my decision-making ability was really diminished from having done so many drugs. And so I had, at some point, I had decided I'd made a contract with God. You make my decisions for me. Just make it very obvious what I'm supposed to do, and then I'll know I'm okay. And this was kind of God the Father. This was the God that I had somehow believed was there, but I didn't have a name for. And I prayed that he would show me what path I was supposed to be on, what particular way was going to be my way. Because at that point I was doing a little bit of everything. I was on my car dashboard. I had pictures of the feet of my guru, and I had feathers from the peyote meeting I had attended and the Indian leader I was following, and just on, rosary beads, and I needed to clean off my dashboard. I needed to have, just one object hanging from my, rear view mirror. I really wanted to have one way. And so I really prayed that God would pick that way out for me, because he knew, where I was at and exactly what my needs were and so on. And I was really expecting somehow an answer to come that would say Zen Buddhism. Because in the background of the counterculture, Zen Buddhism is kind of the top of the heap. It's at the peak of the pyramid. It's the hardest way to go. It's the deepest meditations, etc. And I thought that I was going to be given that answer. And instead I had this tremendous yearning to pray to Jesus. And I was very suspect about that, because having had a background in Catholicism, I really felt I had tried Christianity and that it had failed me miserably. And yet I recognized I'd had so many mystical experiences through drugs and different philosophies by this point that I knew when I was having a mystical experience, I knew I was being drawn to church. And so I figured there must be something that's going to be said that I'll get. These other people won't get, but I'll get it. It'll be some kind of a message between God and me. Christianity, frankly, was not even a consideration for me. I looked down on it as if it were less than the bottom rung on the ladder. And especially born-again Christianity, I felt infinitely superior to the people that I saw on TV who were born-again Christians. I thought that they were really pathetic, and I couldn't relate to them culturally whatsoever. And spiritually, I thought that they were really neophytes. I felt sorry for them. I thought that they were possibly in their first lifetime. And so I continued to have this tremendous magnetic drawing to Jesus. And I knew that I had asked God to show me my way, so I figured, well, it must be along the lines of like Christian Science, or it's not going to be Zen Buddhism because Jesus isn't really in that. So I tried to figure out, I tried to fit in to my particular viewpoint of spirituality and so on. I tried to figure out how am I going to be a Christian? It's got to be some esoteric brand of Christianity. And to make a long story short, I was sitting under a pinon tree out in the hills in New Mexico here, and I was in tremendous turmoil because I was just not going to become a Christian. That was just not in my order of things. And yet I had this incredible drawing to Jesus, and I couldn't figure out what kind of a church would answer that need. And I felt I felt I was having an experience. I felt I was having a mystical experience. Something was really getting a hold of my attention. And I looked down on the ground. This is a good 10 years after my last drug experience, and I knew I was not hallucinating. I looked on the ground and I saw what I had thought was myself in big chunks, like in big puzzle pieces, just piling up. And I thought, well, if that's who I thought I was, then who's sitting here? And I looked up into the sky, and I saw Jesus. And he came down closer to me, and he showed me that he was one with the Father. He kind of just slowly moved into a position where he was one with God the Father on the throne. And I knew in that moment there was beyond a shadow of a doubt, and the moment before I had absolutely been vehemently opposed to this whole idea that Jesus could be the only way. And now I was seeing him, and I knew who he was, and he was showing me that he was the way, and that I had a choice. I could follow him or not. And he came closer, and he held a Bible in his hand. And I remember thinking at the time, I didn't want to say it out loud, because here I was in the presence of Jesus, but I remembered thinking, the Bible? Not that. Anything but that. And he showed me that this was the truth, that I could believe this, that this was not all knowledge, but that this knowledge was true, and that if I knew this, I would know to the right or to the left what was true or not, because I could count on this as being the truth. And I had never been to a church where they did altar calls, and I didn't know about giving your life to Christ or anything like that. And so I knew who he was then, and I was really excited. And the next day I just spontaneously, I know now I was prompted by what we call the Holy Spirit, I spontaneously invited him to come into my life and just to take over, and I was going to follow him. And regardless of the fact that that was going to make me the laughingstock of my crowd, that it was socially the kiss of death, etc., it didn't matter to me. I knew who I had met, and I wanted to follow him. About the time that I recognized that the people who were sitting around getting stoned, talking about the movement and the revolution and so on, were actually going nowhere with their lives. They weren't taking good care of their children. They weren't taking good care of themselves. It was almost an overnight kind of impact. I just didn't want it anymore. I just didn't. I saw that there were foibles within the within the package deal that I had taken on of the counterculture and being a hippie and all that went with it, it was no longer serving to bring me any happiness anymore. It wasn't getting me ahead in life. Not that I was ambitious in the traditional sense of the word, but it wasn't making me get ahead in any sense of the word. I was just spinning my wheels. And I recognized that. And I recognized that I could no longer string together a sentence because I was so saturated with drugs. I recognized that my relationships with men had started off so happily, and each one I thought was going to lead me to some kind of cosmic soulmate situation where I was going to be happily living forever, and each one was just almost a worse disaster than the last. And at some point, you get honest with yourself, and you say, this isn't working. Something is really amiss in this situation. And I knew that drugs, as many good experiences as I'd had on them, as much fun as I had had, that I just was not able physiologically to handle them anymore. That it was destroying me. So that was pretty much for me. That really marked the end. It's a long road. I guess life is for everybody. I've tried to examine what I wanted, what was good, what was valuable from those years. Initially, I think I did throw it out. I walked away from it. And then slowly, some of that has come back, and living in northern New Mexico has been part of, it's just a place where a lot of people are espouse ideas that are really different from the mainstream and so on. And so it's hard for me to answer that question. I have to think about that. Can I think about that a second? Okay. I returned to some of the values I had as a child. I think, strangely enough, being a born-again Christian has given me the freedom to examine a lot of my values. I took on a belief system, but I didn't take on the cultural identity of a born-again Christian. I felt, I guess, grounded enough in myself, identified enough still as, although I'm not a New Ager or a hippie anymore, it certainly is a strong part of my background. I did take a lot with me. There was a lot that was valuable, and I don't really want to throw it away. Everything from the idea of natural foods and enjoying the beauty of the world, enjoying the mysticism of life, the preciousness of life. I guess I can't attribute those strictly to the counterculture, but that's where I learned. That's the period of my life where I really learned to appreciate what was real and what was earthy. And I really did get what I wanted. My dreams did come true. I do have a great husband. I do have beautiful children. I did eventually become a teacher. I'm teaching 6th grade now. I did end up with my early dreams, and I'm still trying to incorporate and sift through and understand what God provides for me and what is just there in the world that isn't really useful to me as a person, isn't really going to help me grow, isn't going to really edify anybody else in my life. It's constantly just a process of sifting and shifting and trying to be facing things honestly and trying to confront issues and trying to be open to what is available that's, I'd say for me it's godly, that what is available that's positive, and I just want to continue to grow as a person. I want to continue to pass on to my children that which is rich and wonderful and good. I think everybody wants to do that. I'm not sorry for having gone through a lot of those experiences. I learned a lot. I did learn that there's a lot of different kinds of people, and that people come to truth, come to different realizations, come to different levels of understanding at different times. It is personally a goal for me to not be judgmental about people, about where they're at and what they're into, but to try to be supportive of that in them which is right and good, and to trust that God will do the rest in their life.